Okay, so we will go ahead and get started. This is Mariemont's Rules and Law meeting. It's 2 o'clock on the 20th of January, 2021. So we only have one topic. Well, I guess we have multiple topics within one topic, but generally speaking, it's with regard to the residency requirement for various employee positions that are in Mariemont, in the government right now. So I guess I'm not going to show them on the screen, but we have documents that we're all looking at that talk about the various positions. The first one is the, sorry, I'm pulling mine up. The police chief. So currently the way things are written in our code book, it states that the police chief does not have to be a resident of Mariemont when hired, but must move here within the boundaries within 6 months of appointment, or it is waived by ordinance. And honestly, I haven't gone back to see if we've waived Chief Hines' employment by ordinance. I hope we have, but we've been out of compliance, if not, for many, many years. So as with all appointments that kind of fall under this and have this residency requirement, you know, we want to find the best person for the job. We are a tiny little place, and so we don't always have the diversity of backgrounds and professions that we need to fill all the appointments. So we're here to discuss whether we want to keep these or waive these. So with that, Rob, you've done most of the, Rob actually identified these. I hadn't even noticed them. So I'm going to let you talk us through any more than that.
Okay. No, I just, the one thing is, you know, we addressed this for the building administrator role. We went ahead and fixed that earlier this year. And I was looking at looking in that same section of the rule of the code book, and then noticed some other ones. So, you know, fiscal officer was already addressed. It's got, you don't have to be a resident for a fiscal officer. And then it's when I came across police chief. Currently, what's in the code book says the police chief does have to be a resident after 6 months of being appointed. Street commissioner and village administrator. So all three of those roles have this requirement that the person become a resident. And again, just like we've addressed it in building administrator, it just seems like we ought to get these all cleaned up so that, as Maggie said, if there's an opening that becomes available, we can truly find the best person for the role versus feeling like we have to try and limit ourselves to somebody who is a resident of the village.
So do we now, or have we ever had a street commissioner?
I don't know if we have. I don't know if we have in the past. We don't have one now.
I have not. I've in my tenure, which is not that long, but 7 years, we have not.
Longest of anybody on council, so you're it,
Maggie. Right now. That's not, it's not to say we wouldn't, although it kind of, to me, you know, it sort of looks like it falls under stuff that we've already got covered. So,
so are you thinking,
I was just curious, that's all.
Are you thinking we should remove it? I mean, I'm flexible around that kind of stuff too.
I looked at that idea too when I was reading this, although I feel like this is a little off the cuff to do that. That could be a later meeting, just because I'd like to understand the role better. I don't know if, because occasionally the way Dan would do things is like, you know, it could be folded into Chris's role right now. It could be folded into somebody else's role right now. And if we ever decide, you know, if Chris ever went on and got another job or retired or whatever, then would the next, I'm making this up, pretend it was in his qualifications.
No, I know what you're doing.
You know, would we?
I didn't really ask because I wanted to admit it. I was just curious.
Yeah. I mean, we could do a little more research because that is a much cleaner, like just getting rid of things we don't need, but I don't know if we need it.
But it is funny because if you read the language about qualifications, it makes it sound like if we don't have a village administrator, we're supposed to have a street commissioner.
Right. So this, when I was reading through this, it just brought up to me, like, I wish I had the brain that just like Rob does, that sits and reads the code book and identifies these things. I had not in all my years really paid attention to these. And we are out of compliance in so many ways. Like, are we required to have these filled or document if we don't? And then if we don't have an administrator, I mean, do we need the street commissioner role? So
Maybe that's a question we can ask Ed. Can you send Ed an email and ask him that, maybe?
Yeah. So so are these required? Because remember, the reason we turned, I think, part of the reason we turned to the fiscal officer model that we've got is because when it was an elected position, it was required to be filled, and we didn't have anyone who wanted it. So not only were we not getting that service, which we need, but we were out of compliance. So we eliminated it and then appointed. So that's what brought that question up for me.
Right. I think it's a good question to ask Ed.
So are they required to be filled? And then can we restructure?
Yeah, and so I don't know if we have to eliminate it or if we just add additional wording that says this role is, not required or something like that. I don't know.
Great to clarify. Okay. All right. That's a good question, Marcy, because that was pretty much you reading my brain.
So the language that I put in there is the exact same language that is in the fiscal officer, and that was the most recent one. It was done in 2014.
Okay.
So I took the language from that and put it in place of the residency requirement language.
Okay.
So that's where I got it from.
Sounds clear to me. Marcy, is it fine with you?
I'm sorry, I was distracted because Bill texted me.
Okay.
And I'm answering him.
Um,
So you were talking about checking with Ed to see if we needed to fill the position.
right. Like, are the two that are not filled, the street commissioner and the administrator, if you look at them in the code book, it basically says if we don't have an administrator, we need a street commissioner.
Okay.
We have neither currently, unless somehow Chris is filling or Don is filling or somebody else in another role is filling this, which for all I know they are.
Okay.
But so that was my comment on why maybe not remove them until we do a little more research.
Yep.
One being like, what exactly is the roles and responsibilities of this person? Is it currently being filled by someone else, which is something that probably Joni and Bill can talk to us about. And then if it isn't, do we need these or are they required to be filled? And that's an Ed question.
And well, in the add-on question I would have to that is, if he says the way it's currently worded makes it sound like you have to have it, can we change the wording so that it doesn't require
Right.
to fill
Can
it?
we restructure them?
Well,
Because we also, there's a whole recreation department and a recreation director in the code book as well that we don't have. They're created in the code book, but we don't have those filled. We're not doing that right now.
Yeah, that came up a couple of years ago, and Dan had mentioned, I think, if I'm not getting confused with another group, as he said, well, that was before we had like the Recreation Commission. So we could either, and that's another question, we could write in the Recreation Commission, or we can just say this is currently not filled because we have an acting Recreation Commission.
Yeah. So I think asking Ed how best to address that would be appropriate.
Sounds great. Okay, so anyway, this street commissioner who may or may not exist and may or may not be a member of the village in terms of their residence, I'm fine with making that not a requirement. Marcy, are you fine with that?
Yes. Okay. And I'm also okay if we clarify whether the roles need to be filled or not, just leaving it in. So if at some point we want a street commissioner, we don't have to, put that in the code.
Yeah, I agree with you, Marcy. My preference would be have it worded in such a way that it's an optional role. So the role's already created. It's just an optional thing. It's just hard when you read the code book. It's hard to tell whether it's required or whether it's optional. I don't know. So
yeah,
right.
It's just I feel like such a disadvantage sometimes talking to you guys, because it's like I'm talking with the biblical scholars versus somebody who's read the verse once.
I'm the same. I'm like that because I don't sit around and read the code book like he does. It's odd that I am in charge of this particular group of people. Okay, so Marcy, are you fine also with the police chief? I mean, obviously it's been working for us for a very, very long time. I think it's gonna be rough to find somebody from our ranks to be a really great police chief like we have.
Yeah, I'm fine with that.
Okay. And then on to the administrator that we don't have. So,
And do you know in the history of Mariemont, have we ever had a village administrator? I mean,
not in the sense that, okay, so there's this structure that I think that's what they call it. I've done a little research on this over the years because I think it could actually improve our infrastructure as a government and like flows of information and communication and even money and handling audits and stuff. We are one of the very, very few villages in Ohio who do not have an administrator style or structure of government.
I'm just wondering why it's in the code book if we've never had one. That's
I mean, you can choose to have this, what we've got, where the mayor really does the, kind of triage and administration and then has staff like Joni and Allison, or you can have a full-time or part-time, village or city administrator. So we've just not opted for that because the mayors have preferred their own, like they want to do it.
So I think this would be like what Marcy was just saying for street administrator. Right? Ideally, it'd be nice to leave it in there as an option, but not a requirement to fill the role.
I think so.
Well, I'm just wondering if, kind of when Mariemont became a village, when they incorporated, did they put that, they put that in our code book specifically to allow that? I mean, how long has that been, been around?
I'll look it up because at the end of these things, it usually has the date that it was passed.
Yeah, I was
Okay.
I'm
just curious.
Yeah.
I don't mean to make more work for you, but
Yeah.
I just like to understand things from different perspectives.
just right here. Okay, I'm going to look this up because it's an interesting question.
I don't even know where my code book is. Somewhere.
The administrator role, this whole section 31.076 was created in 2000.
Was it created or was it updated by the ORC?
Well, there's no other prior date to that. So it references the Ohio Revised Code.
And I wonder if that's where we just pulled it. Like we don't have it. We never had it. It's in there. So we have it in our book because there are a lot of things.
Okay, thank you for looking at that.
But it does say, so Maggie, at the end of that section, it does say 2000 code.
Yep.
So
okay, yeah, I see it.
At some point, there is no other date anywhere. So I'm guessing that was when it was created. I don't know. The legal counsel was created in 76.
Was Dan mayor then?
Well, he was mayor for 20 years. So.
Well, I know, but I don't know exactly what year he was elected because I was living in Williams Meadow.
He filled Mike Lemon's role. He was vice mayor when Mike Lemon had to leave because Mike Lemon became administrator in Columbia Township, so he couldn't do both. And Dan took his spot because he was vice mayor at the time, and he filled Mike's remaining role for 2 years, and he got reelected again for four or five times, whatever it was.
So at the end of my administrator section, yeah, so because it doesn't say like ordinance, blah, 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 it looks to me like it was pulled just from the ORC. Because all the other spots where we've made amendments or changes to the Ohio Revised Code, it'll say ordinance and it'll have the ordinance number. And the last part of that is a year.
Yeah.
So it doesn't look, to me, it doesn't look like we had a hand in it, but.
I wonder if it got stuck in there as part of the codification process.
I think it did.
Because so street commissioner is right above that, and it also says the same thing. It was introduced in 2000.
Yeah.
It looks like as well. And administrator, building commissioner is made back in 1963.
That's a very
Yeah.
good year.
Yeah, well, and the Cat and Dog Warden was created in 1954.
And then it was booted in 2020,
Yes.
having probably never been filled. Okay, so are we okay though? I mean, for me, as important as recruiting for an extraordinary police chief, if we were to recruit for an administrator, I would feel the same conviction about recruiting for an extraordinary administrator. That's a pretty, it's like a person who has to be detail oriented, super organized, and be able to multitask and be pretty social. It's just, it's a unique I don't know, like a unique coming together of some traits in a workforce that don't always come together. So I would want to recruit from the largest possible pool of people. Is it okay with you, Marcy, if we pull the residency requirement from that one?
The only thing I'm thinking, okay, so did Police Chief Hines ever live here?
No.
Okay.
Now, the guy who preceded him, Don Shanks, did. Don
Okay.
Shanks was our police chief, and he lived here. But then Chief Hines, when he came in, he's never lived here.
Okay. All right. I just was curious.
Yeah. And I mean, there's been argument, like, oh, the person who lives here would have the most, at stake by the decisions that they make, but they aren't necessarily, I mean, maybe they're making the decisions based on a love of the, of Mariemont, but they aren't necessarily making decisions based on being the most professionally prepared person for their job. Do you know what I mean? I'd rather have the most qualified professional for this position that we can get rather than somebody who just really wants to do the right thing, as much as that's nice to have.
Yeah, I guess it would just depend on the person. I mean, I wouldn't want somebody to come in here and try to run this like Mason,
No, and what happens with an administrator role, because I'm sure you guys know, Finance Committee is now, Joe asked to put it into that committee. So the administrator gets actually selected by the mayor. The mayor interviews and would propose to council who should be the administrator, then council would approve that or not.
And they're not going to get paid enough where this job would compete with being like a larger city's administrator.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay. All right. And that is all I've got. That is it. Rob, do you have any?
Nope.
Document?
Nope.
Okay. So I'll write it up. I'll get the questions to Ed today. And if I can get answers to them, I mean, what do we want to do based on Ed's answers? Is that going to change the report any? We are recommending to remove residency requirements from all.
I don't think it changes that recommendation. It would just be if there's other changes that he thinks we ought to make as well or not.
Okay. So maybe that would be like, the
That
next
would have to be probably an addendum or something.
or a different meeting if it's big. If he's gonna say like get rid of street administrator, which if it's in the Ohio Revised Code, we wouldn't get rid of it anyway.
So Meg, can you send me a copy of your text of your report before you, or maybe simultaneously when you send it to Joni? Because I just like to read it.
Yeah.
To make sure I, feel like it covered everything.
Yep. And here are my awesome minutes. We had this minutes discussion. This is what they look like. So, okay, that sounds good. I'll send it to you. And then if you have anything you want to change or amend or else.
Yeah.
Pretty simple one.
Okay.
Good deal.
Okay, so that ends our meeting, 2:20. That was a nice fast one. And we'll see you Monday in the meeting.
Okay, sounds
Thanks.
good.
Thanks. Enjoy the nice weather. Bye.
You too.